Well, good morning out there. It is so good to be with you this morning. My name is Derek Skiba, and I work for World Vision. This is the first live World Vision Ignite webinar that we are offering to you, and something that we are calling the Ignite Learning Series. So these are the first seconds of the first webinar that we're offering. So consider it a historic moment in time, and you're a part of it. So Ignite is a learning partnership that equips young people to become global leaders with a biblical worldview. And I invite you to check it out at worldvision.org/Ignite. We believe that young people don't have to wait to change the world. You know, we go through our education and we think, all right, when I grow up, I will do this. You don't have to wait. And we have seen people as a part of this learning partnership that have actually made substantial change in the world. There's a graduate of our program that is in college now, and she is figuring out how to connect her college to refugee communities and make a difference in their lives. So it's amazing what you can do when you believe that you have the ability to do it, even if you are young. There is another person that I would like to introduce you to. His name is Steve Haas, and he is also a firm believer in the next generation of leaders. And Steve is going to be your teacher today, which is truly a blessing. He is one of our best storytellers around. He has traveled extensively, spoken all over the world, has some amazing life experiences, and has seen God at work even in some pretty tough places. And he's going to share stories with you, and there will be some key points in time during this presentation for you to ask questions. And this is a two-way street here. So as things come to mind, throw it in the chat, and we will have a few times where we will be actively taking questions. So I'll check back in with you in a few minutes, but in the meantime, please enjoy your time with Steve.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Derek. This is kind of cool to be here on the first webinar, especially on this day. I am actually talking from 2 blocks south of the famed Point Defiance Park in Tacoma, Washington, where I live. We are finally seeing sun over the last couple of days, which makes being inside just a little bit easier. Although now everybody wants to go outside and maintain 6 feet of distance. If you've been following the news and know this particular state I'm living within, you know the boundaries of this place, and that we're kind of in the epicenter of, or one of the epicenters of, the COVID-19 virus. And so, like all good citizens, with all my neighbors, I'm hunkering down for a couple of weeks. And well, it's been 3 weeks, and I think it's going to go longer. And from what I'm monitoring of the places World Vision is hard at work, this pandemic is really serious stuff. Do you want me to share more? I love distance. I love endurance sports. I love travel. I love hanging with friends, backpacking, history, reading biographies. I love to worship. I love crazy adventures. And I also love Jesus. You want more? I came to World Vision after having seen World Vision's work in a variety of places here and around the world. And what really impressed me was that they combine cutting-edge relief and development practices with a serious commitment to follow Jesus. And I also love the fact that they're willing to roll up their sleeves and get after it. This is an organization that gets dirty in some of the most difficult corners of the planet. And in the last years, we've been engaged in working with communities dealing with AIDS, with Ebola, mass starvation, floods, tsunamis, hurricanes, extreme poverty, violence, refugees. I mean, World Vision is all in when it comes to helping communities survive and find ways to actually thrive. We go to places where so many folks don't and won't, and this is simply because we have a love for people who are struggling to thrive. And from what I saw, transformation was the result. That's why I joined this organization nearly 20 years ago. And from those early experiences with World Vision, it's been a love affair ever since. I think it's now safe to say that no one is disregarding COVID-19 and the significant impact that it's having all over the world. And I just need to say our hearts go out to the families that have had to deal with this with this particular virus, the significant losses that this virus has created, especially those who have lost loved ones and friends. And in my particular area, that's now becoming real, where we actually either know someone or we know someone who actually has been severely impacted. Obviously, as an organization with the largest Christian relief and development footprint of any organization in the world, one of our greatest concerns is for those communities that are tight-knit, that are crowded geographically. I was just listening to a web simulcast today from Gaza. If you can imagine the number of people that are living in very, very close quarters there and what a contagion would do there, what a virus spread would do there. People who are just squeezed too close to one another. And too often they exist without the medical capacity or life-saving resources that we have here in the United States. Right now, you and I are only hearing about this impact of the virus on our region of the world or the impact on your own local community. And that's because it's closest to home and therefore it's personally interesting. But over the past month here in Seattle, we've heard heroic stories of frontline medical personnel, ways in which folks are really starting to serve your neighbors. And I'm hoping that that's true of your neighborhoods as well. We don't tend to hear, unfortunately, how the virus is beginning to impact under-resourced communities globally, places that are already struggling before a viral pandemic becomes a reality. You can only imagine what our staff is doing internationally to keep communities safe. Where congested populations, lack of resources, these are the kinds of things that they just experience daily. And now one of the emergency issues, what World Vision is attending to, is the lack of clean water. Now, we know something about that. World Vision is known worldwide for our delivery of clean water. In fact, in the last decade, World Vision has become the leading provider of that particular resource for the developing world. And it's safe to say that we're providing clean water to a person who doesn't have it every 10 seconds. Now, when you think about that, especially during Holy Week, I sometimes wonder, is that important to God? I mean, does the Bible have any description of water? And what does it have to say about clean water? The scripture is clear. Clean water is something that God gives as a gift, leading to a community's flourishing. It's a sign of health. It's a sign of hope. In the Old Testament book of Isaiah, Isaiah 58:11, Isaiah the prophet says, "The Lord will guide you always. He'll satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your body. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail." In the New Testament, in the book of John, Jesus calls himself the source of living water. Later in the book of Revelation 21:6, he says that if you're thirsty, he'll give us the water of life. And obviously that's drawing this sense of just who he is, the kind of life-giving properties that he gives as well. As such, clean water and what it means to communities around the world is of concern to God. So if you combine all of that, for the sake of this webinar, I think it raises two important questions. And maybe these are questions that I'll throw at you first, and you can use the chat section. If you look at the bottom of the page, there's a little place for chat. Tap on that, and you can try to answer some of these questions, and that'll also be a way for us to dialogue together. Number one, what does clean water have to do with the coronavirus? Little question to just start letting that circulate in your head. What does clean water have to do with coronavirus? And two, what does this have to do with me? I mean, I recognize, after all, that most of us who are listening to this are students, and my guess is you may be asking that. I mean, I'm just a student. I've got a lot of things I might do later, but right now I've just kind of got to study, hang with friends, hang with my family. I'm on this thing for this morning, but I've got other things I got to do today. These are the two really good questions. It's my hope to answer these and other questions that you may have. And again, I invite you to send in any question that comes up, and I'll attempt to answer them real time at the end of the session. Also know that while I'm sharing, it'd be great to hear from you too. So feel free to use that same chat function. Let me know where in the world you're watching this and how long your school's been closed. Maybe is a great way to start. We want to get to know you. And for those of us in Ignite, relationship comes first, and it's core to everything that we do in ours. So it's important that as we get to know you from our side, we tell you who we are, that you tell us who you are as well. So again, where are you watching this from, and how long has your school been closed? Now, back to the H2O thing. It's so fundamental that no one is even mentioning it when we come to clean water. It has everything to do with battling any harmful virus or any bad bacterial agent that comes to do us harm. COVID-19 has already shown the world just how quickly a virus can spread when it's traveling undetected, unchallenged. And so much of the transmission has to do with bodily touch, hands, feet, faces. It's not hard to imagine just how oversized a clean water role plays in getting rid of the virus itself. But it's more than that. Unclean water of any kind runs down the body's ability to stave off or fight infection or sickness, thereby compromising a person's body as it tries to fight against a really, really strong virus. If the current pandemic reaches an impoverished community already dealing with sickness caused by untreated water or lack of clean water access, the situation isn't difficult. Too often it turns deadly as the community lacks its number one defense. Now let's face it, it is so much a part of our daily lives that most of us don't even think twice about it. Water, for the most part, is, well, it's really unsexy. I mean, completely unsexy. I mean, after all, over 75% of the earth is covered by it. Lakes, oceans, streams, water vapor, glaciers, polar caps. It's in the air. And man, don't I know that? I live in the Northwest. Our bodies are mostly water. Yeah. In fact, if you squeeze the water out of you, you'd tip the scales at less than half of what you weigh now. And my guess is you probably also have a few more wrinkles, but I digress. It's crazy that it's so important to our survival and yet completely forgettable at the same time. Now, here's another question. How many sources of clean water exist in your house? Feel free to use the chat function next to it. And by the way, thanks. We've got people coming in from Tacoma, Las Vegas, Seattle, Winthrop. Hey, great to have you on the call. Chicago, Woburn, Massachusetts. How many sources of clean water exist in your house? Use the chat function. Yeah, thousands. Thanks, Keelan. Yeah, I bet you do. How many sources of clean water? Now, hazard a guess. I'm going to give you some freebies. It's so easy for you to go to the shower and think of the kitchen sink. Where else? Making a mental list. What about the fridge? You forgot that one. Come on. There's some more. Here's one I'm almost certain you didn't think of. Your toilet. Yeah, your toilet. The water tank on your toilet. Clean water. Count it. Keep going. What do you think? Now, I have a moderately sized home, and all in, I counted 15 locations. Now, given the fact that nearly 800 million people don't have clean water access, that's a fairly sobering reality. Another question. Feel free to use the chat function to come up with the answer. Here we go. The average American family at home uses how many gallons of water per day? Okay. How many gallons of water per day? Think about it. How much water do you think your family uses in a single day? Showers, dishes, laundry. Now, I know you're reaching for your phone to Google it. Try guessing first. Yeah. 120, 100. Let me give you a head start. The average amount of water brushing your teeth is 4 gallons. And I know you're thinking that's a lot of water. It is. Some of you leave the water on. 4 gallons. Okay? So how much water in an average day for the family at home? Daily, the answer is on average about 300 gallons average. So why are we talking about water? Because let's face it, we're swimming in the stuff. Our entire existence depends on it. As one village chief once told me, water is life. Water is life for everyone, especially felt by people like Marie. Now, one of the things we attempted to do was try to give you a video inside this particular Zoom app, but we found it a little difficult. And so what we're going to do is to actually send you the YouTube link at the end of this, as well as possibly even in the chat function. And then that way you can watch this on your own time. I really hope you do. Marie's story is powerful. This is an incredible story of yet one example of the current reality faced by nearly 800 million people in the world today. It's important for us to think about that. The global water crisis impacts all of us, but it's keenly felt in 1 in 9 person doesn't even have access to clean water. So if you were to just line up 9 of your friends, I mean, consider that. I just think of my family and add 4. One of us doesn't have clean water. That's an incredible statistic. And the misery index hardly ends there. When it comes to clean water and its access, worldwide, there is a clear bias against women and girls. Women, old and young alike, are typically the ones who look for it and fetch it. And they spend an estimated 200 million hours hauling it every single day. At that rate, given that this journey often takes multiple trips in order to accomplish, there's no time to go to school, develop meaningful relationships with their friends, or act on a dream for their future. In other words, you can't have a childhood if you're always looking for water. In one African community I visited, I wanted to experience what it's like to carry a full 40-pound jerry can, which is what most people use to transport their water, from a clean water source to a home site. Let's face it, I like to think of myself as fit. And so I thought to myself, I've read about this, I've talked about this, but I mean, really, how difficult could this be? And then, like all the young people of the village, they all lined up because they all wanted to see who was going to pick up their jerry can where they wouldn't have to carry it. Some person like myself was going to carry it. And although we didn't speak the same language, this little 11-year-old kid got matched up with me. This was his jerry can. And he seemed to understand immediately that someone else was going to do the heavy lifting. And I could just see he caught on because he was grinning from ear to ear. I mean, he loved this. What I didn't realize was that for some reason, unbeknownst to me, I had drawn the short straw. And out of all the water cans lined up, I got the longest of the water walk options. And for the next 10 minutes, it felt like an eternity. I agonized trying to lug 40 pounds of dead weight over a ridgeline. I sweated through everything. And I was in a t-shirt, but I mean, it was completely soaked when I got finished. And I finally kind of deposited the jug at this young guy's home. When I looked at my watch, I'd been carrying the jug for about 10 minutes. Now, earlier that day, in a location about an hour from the village site, I had seen men and women trudging 60 to 90 minutes to an unclean water site to draw polluted water to drink, because that is all that they had. Now, here's another question perhaps you could answer. On average, how many miles does a person walk to get water in the under-resourced world? How far does an average person have to walk to find water? Yeah, and I like the fact that some of you said you couldn't carry 40 pounds. I'm just with you on that one, by the way. Unbelievable, unbelievably heavy. How far does the average person have to walk? I see 1 mile, I see 20 feet. I see 8 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles, 25 feet, 2 miles. Great answers, by the way. The answer is, now keep in mind, you got to maybe ford a river, you got to try to find a river, a stream, a lake, or a pond. Think of dry or wet climate. And the answer is, remember that it impacts disproportionately women and young girls, old and young, what, right? The answer is 6 kilometers, a little over 3.5 miles. Now go back to that 300 gallons for the average American family. Think about that. It might be interesting to factor in just how much a gallon of water weighs. Any guesses? Again, use the chat function right next to. This is a great way to interact. How much does a gallon of water weigh? £7. That's pretty close, actually. 10 pounds, 1 pound, 10 pounds, a lot. You obviously took the same math class I did. How much does it weigh? It weighs close to 8 pounds. And if you got that 7 pounds, give yourself a gold star. Now do the math. 300 gallons times 8 pounds. 8 times 0, 8 times 0, 8 times 3, 24. 2,400 pounds. 300 gallons weighs 2,400 pounds. Yeah! Gang, that's a ton of water. Literally. Now get inside the meaning of that little exercise. Can you imagine you, your mom, or your sisters carrying that much every day? Well, of course not. None of us can imagine ourselves carrying that much weight. And that's why World Vision works so hard to deliver water close to people's homes, to schools, to medical clinics, because it's, as it's already been said, water is life. Now, before I roll to some Q&A, there are two other components rarely talked about when it comes to clean water that are equally important. So much so that development experts now talk about this threesome one talking about clean water solutions. The two other musketeers are sanitation and hygiene. And it's why you hear development experts always talking about water, sanitation, and hygiene, or wash. I mean, I guess they could have turned this one around. I mean, it could have been schwa, but wash sounds better. Let's just stay with that. It doesn't take a great deal of common sense to realize that clean water only helps so far as a community has control of where they dispose their community waste. That seems to just be common sense. Waste. It's what it sounds like. It's garbage. It's industrial runoff. It's pollution. It's gray water, or it's poop from its various sources. So let's face it. Clean water stops being clean when it starts getting polluted. And everyone knows you have to figure out what to do with human and animal waste as bacteria so easily poisons fresh water sources. If your community has little or no control, then you open yourselves up to a revolving door of sickness, disease, and unfortunately, too often, death. When you realize that 1 in 3 people on Earth don't have access to a toilet, think about that. There are 3 people. Let's say 3 of you are sitting right now watching this. 1 of you doesn't have a toilet. Can you imagine what a massive problem that is? 1 in 3 people? We don't grasp this issue very well because we just have water around us. For millions of years, it seems like we have existed with just having all of these resources around us. But what if that's just not true? What would we want someone to do for us if we were in that situation, if we were the one? Well, you guessed right, Padawan. You would want them to help you build a toilet. Now, I traveled to the mountains of the Dominican Republic near the border of Haiti and did a kind of parade of homes, In this case, it was a parade of latrines. You know, the little toilet with kind of boxes over it. It's a deep hole in the ground, metal sheeting for walls, and some newspaper for paper. They actually use newspaper for toilet paper. Now think a more solidly built porta potty, and I think you're right on the right idea. In each impoverished home that we went to, World Vision had helped homeowners build a latrine adjacent to their dwellings. And I just need to be honest. I felt a little embarrassed by the wild celebrations that would spontaneously erupt at every home that we arrived at. There would be singing, there was dancing. My last name gives it away. I'm Dutch, and I'm a terrible dancer. I admit it. I freely admit it. And after a small speech from one of the community leaders about their joy in having a toilet that they could use, I just was like, golly, I mean, I work for World Vision. Shouldn't we be doing something more important than just spontaneously dancing around a latrine. And then it was in the dance line, encircling a latrine, that I finally got it. I remember that feeling of awkwardness just suddenly just went away. And I realized where I was, and I realized what World Vision had done. The community we were visiting had been heavily hit by the HIV virus, and many of the young adults had died as a result of having full-blown AIDS. And maybe you know that when you have HIV, your immune system has been whacked. You just don't have one. And it leaves you little to no immunity to anything that comes your way, little to no ability to fight off illness like bacteria causing agents that might enter your bloodstream. And that just happens to be really plentiful in an environment that doesn't have toilets. The latrine, the simple toilet in this case, represented the primary control of bacteria that could be lethal to someone who was immunity compromised. The latrine served as a gift of life to the homeowners who were infected and affected by the HIV virus. And finally realizing this, actually understanding the impact that a toilet was about to make for each of these families, well, you know, even being Dutch with questionable moves, man, did I dance. It isn't only sanitation. We're also finding with the coronavirus, great hygiene has to be engaged as well. If we're going to keep ourselves and those around us, if we're going to keep us safe. Children's growth patterns are inextricably linked to what kind of bacteria and infection they do battle with, and we want to give them a fighting chance to develop normally. All over the world, to get out our message, we've realized that hearing hygiene messages from a puppet might actually work better than from an adult. You just need to trust me on this. And so through a really engaging partnership with Sesame Street, World Vision has created our own Muppet. I mean, this is crazy, but it's true. And her name is Raya. And kids would rather learn from a Muppet than from an adult. And it appears that that's not only true in the United States, it happens to be true the world over. Raya is a special Muppet educator who teaches kids in a variety of language how to wash their hands, how to brush their teeth, basic hygiene technique. And this education is so critical if we're going to build safe hygiene practices. These are setting in place long-term behavior patterns. And the sooner that these kids actually learn them, well, frankly, the safer that they'll be. And again, we're going to put a link to a little video on Raya inside the chat or in a follow-up email, so you'll be able to actually see Raya in action. I've actually been in a Middle East country watching her speak Arabic as she teaches Syrian refugee kids these critical lessons on how to take care of proper hygiene so that they don't get sick. So, what can you and I do with this information? Well, at the very least, I hope some of you, some of what I have shared has caused some of you to think seriously about what you and I take so easily for granted. In spite of the craziness created by the pandemic, we're still a part of the fortune of over 6 billion people with access to clean water. And for me, that's just all the more reason for us to pray for those who struggle without it. Well, Steve, you know, like, what would we pray? Well, pray for the one who said he provides, pray to the one who says he provides living water for more people to get access to clean water. That's an honest prayer. Pray for organizations like World Vision seeking to provide it to communities around the world, that we would be able to provide it more, provide it faster. Pray for governments and organizations to invest more funds into the finding and providing of clean water. So much of what we do is by grants, government grants, philanthropic or foundation grants. We need more of them. We need more organizations to get involved. Pray for women and girls whose lives are completely upended due to finding and carrying water, and so much of it unclean. And then don't stop there. Ask the Lord where you can serve as an advocate or where you can raise awareness. When I found out about the extent of this issue, I shared what I had with some of my friends. And did it lead us to creating new organizations around clean water? No. But it was important for me to hear my own voice relating this critical information and sensitizing others to this global need. And it's probably important to say that my friends, by the way, appreciated my sharing. Write your government representative. Always important. Do a presentation at school. Be creative. There are so many ways to be an advocate. Raise funds for organizations that are in the fight to provide clean water, like World Vision. We found out that on average, $50, $50 provides a person with clean water for life. So go for it. How many people can you release from the prison of unclean water? And every year, we run into young people that are willing to jump in and free people from the scourge of unclean water. I'm including, in fact, a YouTube link in this webinar recording of an incredible young woman named Addison. And by the way, she caught the eye of Steve Harvey. And her story actually went on his program. And the advocacy work she is doing, even today, continues to grow in such extraordinary ways. You can change the world. And all it takes is just a little bit of initiative. And at World Vision, we've created all sorts of ways you can do this. One of the most popular, by the way, is the Global 6K. World Vision gets folks from all over the world to join us in running or walking a little over, you guessed it, 3.5 miles. Again, that average distance a person walks to find clean water, so that we can all better understand what it means to be someone who has to walk that far, to get water that far. Every year, thousands of people like you have helped to raise millions of dollars in coming alongside folks who've had to look for water like that. Well, I know our Ignite team have deposited plenty of resources to help you dig a bit further. I'm going to now turn it over to my friend Derek, who will take us from here. Derek.
Steve, there was a question that is very relevant, interesting. How come country governments don't make sure their people have good sanitation? And I think this is very, very telling, because so often in development work, we want to go with countries in partnership, but there are obstacles here. And, wouldn't it be great if everybody in the world had governments that would work with them on this? So what are some of the obstacles there? How do we work with them?
Well, one of them is just people practices. I mean, when you, and I'm just going to call it what it is, it's called open defecation. When you just kind of lay waste wherever you lay waste, and that's kind of what you've always done. I can't tell you how many countries I've been to in which the little ones, because they don't have the funds to buy diapers, Pampers, etc., they don't have the cleaning facilities to be able to clean a cloth diaper, if even that's what you had. And so the child just wears a T-shirt. And so they just defecate there. Someone just kind of shovels it and throws it into the woods, or they have an open pile, kind of an open hill. And when this has been the common practice for years, and no one really tied illness, sickness, bacteria with the waste. There's too many other things that we have to apply our very, very limited resources to. And also governments that are often overseeing these countries have very, very limited resources to begin to do the kinds of things that World Vision's now doing, or other organizations like them in the field, to apply these practices. So we got to get over two hurdles. One, we got to get over the resource hurdle of making sure we have the resources to put these things in place. But two, we have to change a mindset. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing like having HIV in a community, and you now have realized that that is killing all of your people, and that it's a lack of immunity that in the end is actually killing them, and that bacteria that has been deposited all over your yard, all over, where you work, that literally is a death agent. When that happens in a community, our work is so much easier to create these receptacles for the bacteria. And again, this is such a serious problem. And I'm so glad that there are many actors now starting to step up and own this. It's such an awkward topic to talk about. I mean, let's try to be taken seriously, and you're going to talk about a toilet. But when 1 in 3 don't have one, this is serious business. And it's polluting many of the sources of clean water that we have.
So the work in countries, I mean, this is not a quick thing. That's really great lasting development work. It takes time. It takes trust building. It takes these relationships with government officials, but also a groundswell to where people could see the value within their own lives, and there's leaders within their own community that are the early adopters and can see, okay, my neighbor is doing well now. One thing that has also come up as a question, there must be a heightened anxiety all around the world with coronavirus and the access to hand washing and that sort of thing. World Vision is responding in nearly all of the 100 countries where World Vision works, a focus on a subset of those that are of much higher risk. But this has got to create a lot of anxiety in communities where there is not an easy access to clean water for hand washing, etc. Can you tell us, just paint a mental picture of one of these situations that you've been in where it's been so crowded, where you have just said, wow, how do people get clean around here? I know you've been in refugee communities, all sorts of things. Can you just paint a picture of what that's like?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that hits me directly in light of the fact that it was not that long ago. I've taken quite a few trips to the Middle East, and I was at a refugee camp that is inside Beirut, Lebanon. Lebanon is a country right above Israel, right below Turkey. To the side is Syria, where a civil war has been fought, and probably a poster child of the refugee crisis, because they've got they've had close to about 2 million refugees that have flowed across their border and found themselves now in Lebanon. And a lot of them, because they were Palestinian initially, they found themselves in a Palestinian refugee camp that already was overcrowded with about 13,000 people. Now, because of the refugees from Syria who are Palestinian, who have come back to be with relatives because they're escaping the war, there's now 32,000. And I have the air quality just walking the narrow lanes inside this refugee camp was so bad. I mean, I don't usually do, I don't make comments about people's air, but I turned to the guy that was taking us in, and I said, this is like the foulest air I have ever breathed in. And he said, I live here. His word was, that was the only thing he could respond. I live here. And the water itself was water that was actually being pulled off of municipal lines and then vivisected, split up, because there wasn't just enough water even to go around. Even the electrical wires, there was one electrical wire coming in, and then you had these things called splitters, which are people just taking wire and hooking in so that they could have some semblance of electricity. In that close an environment, where do you touch? Where do you walk? Where do you stand? Everything about you is crowded. Everything about you is congested. I just talked with one of our staff in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. The Rohingya who have come across Myanmar and are now housed, about 1 million of them, in this place called Cox's Bazar. She's the national director. She said, when coronavirus hits, and we know that it will, when it hits here, what are we going to do? Because everybody is so congested. They can't go anywhere. They can't just run away. They're stuck. And what happens when families are told that they have to social distance? They can't. I talked with a guy in Gaza today. When the question was, what do you do for social distancing? There was a pause, and just a long pause. And he went, what?
Yeah, how do you do it?
Social distance? I mean, you have the great benefit of going to another room, maybe another floor of your house. But what happens when you have two families in an 8x10 square? What do you do then? And you sleep, eat, cook, everything there. So this is a huge issue for us. And I would be less than honest if I said we've got it completely solved. World Vision has this one. Just call us. We'll be ready to go. No. We're in 17 focus countries right now out of the 100 countries we work in. Over $100 million initiative that we've put forward because it is so significant. Even $10 million is being raised currently for just getting food to school kids in our own country. who are going without, unfortunately.
Thanks for talking about that. One other question that's coming up, just about drilling a well. I know that if we want to bring water into community, there could be a variety of factors there insofar as drilling a well. If it goes easily, this could cost a few $100s or maybe $1,000, but I mean, these could be pretty expensive. The hurdles, how deep is the groundwater? Can you just talk about like a scenario that you've seen of what does it take to drill a well in the community? How do you get buy-in from the local officials? How do you get buy-in from people in the community to even use the thing if they've never had clean water?
Well, the great thing is everybody. Did I say everybody? Everybody wants clean water. Everybody. There's no one who doesn't want clean water. Every community we're in wants clean. Give us clean water. Will you give us clean water? They want clean water sometimes before they want education for their families and kids. I mean, clean water, clean water, clean water. The issue is it's really difficult sometimes, to get to where there is clean water. I was in the Dominican Republic, and the place where they needed to get it was a spring, but the spring was in the mountains. So they had to literally tap the spring, but then they had to lay pipe over a fairly mountainous range. And that meant, going up hills, going down hills. And then water also carries a charge. And so if you have any kind of metal pipe and you have a charge in the water, you can actually watch a pipe blow up if you don't find a way to get the charge out of the water. I bet most people didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Little factoid.
Wow.
It's not only the distance, but sometimes water, in order to tap it, it's deep. And so that's why you hear about drilling rigs. So getting a drilling rig to the right place to drill, to find that water. Sometimes it's 30 feet, sometimes it's 300 feet, sometimes it can, be close to 1,000 feet. And there's an expense to that of going further and further down. And then there's different types of drilling equipment and different ways of getting water. So if you have a spring, that's great. It's coming out of the ground. Let's tap that and get that spring to go. In the case of where you're going to go for an aquifer, you're going to go for an underground water source, you're going to need a drill, and we have different ways of getting that. You're going to need piping. That could be plastic, metal. Then there's got to be a way to bring that water out. And we've got all sorts of mechanisms for that, whether it's somebody on a playground gym, so that as kids actually play on that little merry-go-round thing, it is
because
actually
they're having fun and it's actually helping get the water out.
It's really great, but you got to have kids that are willing to do that. Otherwise, you're an old person actually swinging that thing.
Yeah,
and you've seen that on the playground too.
You have to keep convincing the kids that it's just fun. Otherwise,
Exactly. Or this is what you have to do rather than carrying it. And I guarantee you a child would rather do that. But then also there's little pumps in which even a child can, almost like cycling can stand on a little pump and pump it up. Then there's some that, most of the ones you see around the world are the ones in which they've got a handle and they're pulling it up. Most schools have that. But again, it's because it is sometimes difficult to find or difficult to get to. It comes at different levels of the ground because, again, we're having to pull up clean water. And then the equipment needed often has a charge to that. We have to pay for that. And so all those things. And that's one of the reasons why governments struggle, because this is an expensive option and it's a critical option. And the last one I would just say is this. Just because you get one of these wells doesn't mean that it's always going to work. When I said that there's a charge, it means that they break down. There's corrosion. There's mechanical failure. And so it's critical that the people who get the well learn how to take care of it, how to maintain it. And I am so proud of our teams, because one of the comprehensive things that we do is we train communities how to take care of their own well. As I told the leader of a band that I was actually taking through Africa, he asked the important question of the village elder. He said, when it breaks down, who fixes it? And the village elder said, we do. And I turned to him and I said,
that's so cool.
That's the best answer, because that means he owns it. We don't own it. We helped him create it. We helped him put it in, but we trained him to maintain it. And so because they maintain it, these wells with World Vision, the average is well beyond 20, 30 years. The well stays, whereas the normal average of a well is about a year and a half.
Steve, this is so good, Steve. We greatly appreciate all of your wisdom that you've spoken today, your experiences, and thank you. I mean, to have you as our first speaker here, it means a lot. So really appreciate you, Steve. For everyone out there across the nation who is tuning in, thank you for being a part of this. The good news is that we are going to offer this for the next 7 weeks. We have World Vision experts from across different areas of work lined up, ready to talk, and we want this to be a conversation, something fun. Please tell your friends and family what you've learned. You're going to receive an email today with today's recording and those resources that Steve has mentioned. So check your email in the next couple of days if you've registered for this, and you'll see a link to the event for next week. So I'm seeing some comments here. Looking forward to watching the videos. Grateful for this opportunity for our family. So it's great to hear from you. Thank you. Keep washing your hands. We're all in this together. Have a great day. God bless.